7:30, so we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Maura, can we do a roll call, please?
Bensonville.
Here, you got me.
Peter's unable to attend today. Displain.
Here.
Elmhurst.
Here.
Harwood Heights.
Here.
Niles.
Here.
River Grove.
Here, representing Cozumel.
Yeah, good.
Oh, sorry, I missed Parker. Sorry, Ernie.
That's okay, Maura. I'm here. Posting from Miramar Beach, Florida.
Man, oh man, you guys. Schaumburg.
I'm here and in Schaumburg.
Schiller Park
Schiller Park is here.
and Woodsdale.
Here.
Okay, we have quorum.
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our January 25th, 2022 meeting. Are there any changes that need to be made to the minutes? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve?
Motion
So
to
moved,
approve.
Park Ridge.
Harwood Heights. Oh, I'll take a second.
Thank you. Okay. Roll call. This is the part I'm not going to miss about.
Right. Me neither. Bensonville.
Yes.
Displains.
Yes.
Elmhurst.
Yes.
Harwood Heights.
Yes.
Niles. We lose Joe?
Joe looks frozen.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove.
Abstain, I wasn't here for the meeting.
Okay. Schaumburg,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
and Wooddale.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay. Now is the time where ONCC members who are not officially a part of the Fly Quiet Committee can speak before the committee dives into our work for the day. So are there any ONCC commission members who'd like to speak?
Yes, Karen. Hi, Frank here.
Hi, Frank.
I would just like to implore everybody to set aside their own personal noise experience and try to come on agreement with what would be best for the communities in general, without saying, my house, my this, my neighborhood. Let's think of the community in general, and together, let's get together and do something that's good for everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Any other ONCC members who wish to speak before we dive in? Okay, seeing none, we are going to jump in where we left off last month. If you'll recall, we were making final refinements to alternative B so that we could kind of revisit the changes that occurred over a series of meetings, make sure everything was working well together. We got through almost everything, but have secondary configurations left to discuss. When we finish that conversation, we're going to jump right into refining alternative H. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, we're going to continue on where we left off at the last meeting. We made our way through the majority of the elements of alternative B. Before we do that, just a really quick recap. We are continuing to review and revise the alternatives that this committee has moved forward with. Those are alternative B and H and their subsequent iterations. We have gone through the primary elements of alternative B, except for number 3 there, secondary configurations. We have gone through it at least in the first round, and now we're taking the opportunity to go back and discuss and revisit any changes that the committee would like to consider. And so before we get into that, just a reminder that the secondary configurations to this point have not changed. There has not been any changes to alternative B secondary configurations since the alternative was moved forward. The secondary configurations for both alternatives, as a reminder, we've discussed this quite a bit in the past. The purpose is to account for changes in wind conditions at the airport. Again, the airport it primarily is influenced by wind, which dictates which runways should be used for arrivals and departures. And the airport operates in two primary configurations that we refer to as west flow and east flow, depending on the wind conditions. If the wind conditions are favorable, then we would use the configuration in the primary schedule. If the wind conditions in that week are not favorable for that primary configuration, we would use the secondary configuration, which is a direct reciprocal of the primary. So for instance, in week 1, we have a west flow primary configuration of departures on 27 left and arrivals on 27 center. And if the winds were to be coming from the east that week, the schedule would switch to the secondary configuration, which is the exact opposite, arrivals on 9 center and departures on 9 right. Now, the group from FAIR and Dan has brought up concerns with the secondary configurations and what they consider to be potential consecutive impacts, specifically with the configurations of the crosswinds. You'll see in week 3 and week 6, configurations L and I are crosswind configurations. Those are departures on 4 left and arrivals on 4 right for L, and arrivals on 22 right and departures on 22 left on configuration I. Both of those configurations, L is the secondary for I and I is the secondary for L, the direct reciprocal. The factor that FAIR is pointing out, and I will let Dan speak to this more so that I don't misinterpret what their argument is, but you'll see in week 3, and I think it'll help if I advance here a slide. In week 3, you'll see the primary configuration, week 3 is L with departures on 4 left and 4 right. The designated long runway for L is runway 9 right on the north airfield. Now, the reciprocal or the secondary configuration, if we were to have to switch to the west flow configuration, configuration I, you'll see that that long runway switches to the south airfield, 28 center. This is due to the fact that if we were to keep the long runway as 9 right on the north airfield, that results in a conflict with the arrival runway where we have intersecting runways there. You can see the crosswind runway 22 right intersects both runways 9 center, 27 center, and 9 right, 27 left. So air traffic has said that if a long runway were to be used for this configuration, they would prefer to be on the south airfield to deconflict from those intersecting runways. As a result, you will see then as we move into week 4, that long runway stays on the south airfield. And so, and again, I'm going to let Dan speak to this more in a second, but that is where FAIR is saying that there's the potential for consecutive impacts if the long runway 28 center is scheduled for that week. It will also be the primary arrival runway on week 4. I'm sorry, 28 center on week 4 in the primary configuration. So Dan, I'll turn it over to you at this point, and you can disagree with anything I said, or if I misinterpreted anything, feel free to correct me.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. I should let you finish the presentation. This is why you should always hire professionals like Landerman Brown for both graphics and explanation, but I'll do my best. If Ryan, right off the bat, if we could pick up on our old slide deck, I just want to run the committee through our reasoning. The first slide of that deck. And I'll do it quickly so that there's enough time for questions or discussion.
Sure. You want me to pull up your slide deck?
Correct.
Okay. Just let me know which.
Yeah, start there. and
Okay.
Go through quickly. So the representation here, we took this is just fly quiet period 1, but it's representative of a few things that are consistent across all the tests in both fly quiet periods. And even though this was a period of dominant west flow, what's fairly consistent is you get both west flow and east flow in most weeks. Here, west flow are the blue bars, east flow is the orange. What's also consistent across all the tests and interim fly quiet is a high reliance on secondary configurations. In this example is 52%. So the buy-in we're sort of looking from the committee is that east and west flow occur most weeks, despite what you've chosen as the primary, and that there's a reliance on the secondary configurations. We're not using this as a representation of compliance. Compliance was relatively low. We would expect that to change once the program is implemented, training, and with time. But we do think it's a representation of wind predictability. Next slide, please. So the way we approach this problem with the understanding that east and west flow come most weeks and looking at the current way everything's presented, it can be a little bit hard to see where the problem really is. So we simplified the schedule basically like an equation. You take one variable out of the equation. In this case, we show it all in west flow. In there, you can clearly see what the issue is. You have those 3 weeks, 2, 3, and 4, and then repeats in the second 6 weeks where the south airfield is used west flow 3 consecutive weeks in a row. And what this also illustrates, the problem really isn't that the wind's in west flow. The problem is that that long runway doesn't toggle to the north airfield. And you can see in the lower line where it's highlighted in green, that's the recommended configuration, which keeps those long runways alternating back and forth. So the question you might ask is, does this just solve this for the south airfield? If you could advance to the next slide. But the same problem occurs in the north airfield as well in east flow. It's a little bit harder to see since it laps around to the first week. But the same principle, that there's 3 consecutive weeks, east flow, north airfield on the long runway, with the solution being the proposed configuration FF, which keeps the long runway in the south airfield. And we want to be sure this doesn't boil down to a parallel versus diagonal argument. It really isn't. The idea here is to have predictability and equity. We don't think anyone, if you're the designated long runway in 1 week, should have it the next week and the following week. Go to the next slide, please, Ryan. And the 2 configurations we're recommending, this is the east flow configuration. The current configuration FF is the one that was reviewed by the FAA and air traffic control for consideration by this committee. The alteration we're recommending, since this configuration does not have a CRO constraint, is to move that arrival runway, in particular, the departure one follows, to the inboard, because we already see significant utilization on 10C. And then next, the final slide, Ryan. And the reciprocal is true in the north airfield. Configuration II is the configuration reviewed by the FAA and air traffic control. Once again, to our understanding, there is no CRO constraint, so that long runway could be moved to the inboard once again to move some arrivals off of 28C. So with that, I'll open it up to, we're prepared to answer any questions if anyone has something specific. We'll go from there. Thank you.
I would like to add one thing and just make sure the committee understands FAIR's proposal. So the concern is perceived consecutive impacts on operations on a non-primary departure runway. And so what I mean by that is, like we talked about quite a bit, your primary configurations have a primary departure runway and a primary arrival runway. For week 3, that's 4 left departures and 4 right arrivals. And the goal of this program is to have the majority of operations, if not all the operations, ideally would be all the operations, only use those runways. As we've discussed, in certain configurations, because of the length of the runways, there will be a need for operations to occur on a longer runway, but that need should be only absolutely if needed and not a given. So we are, in FAIR's proposal, driving operations from a primary runway, which would be 4 right. If I flip here back and forth, you'll see the secondary configuration on I in week 3, switching from 22 right now to 27 center. And so you're moving and I'll let the committee deliberate this, but my understanding of what the committee, part of the criteria here was to include the crosswind runways in the program and to use them as much as we can. And by doing this, you're now driving operations away from that primary crosswind runway to a parallel runway to account for potential operations on a long runway that ideally should only be used if needed. So I just want to make sure that that is understood in the proposal.
Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, Dan, for providing us your detailed explanation on your proposed changes. So at this point, we are going to go back to our standard format, and everyone in the committee will have an opportunity to ask questions, provide their kind of thought process, and we'll go through everybody twice. So with that, Evan, you are up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I want to thank FAIR for offering a solution. I think in the past I have bickered that they've called out problems, necessary problems, and not offered solutions. This is a great step forward. So thanks for all the effort you guys put into this. There's a few things that I think we need to get back to basics on. I'm looking back at our May 6, 2016, when we're trying to draft up the Fly Quiet. We were calling it Fly Quiet 2 back then. There were different runways and everything, but there were a couple of criteria that we had in there that I just want to bring back to the forefront, and I think would help address one of Dan's concerns. Specifically, it was the east-west balance. And I brought this up before, and I just really want to get this in writing at some point. Back in 2016, we used to accept that aircraft would have a 5-knot tailwind before switching flows. The goal was trying to get to more of a 50-50 balance around the airfield. That has fallen off our radar, so to speak, and I'd like to bring that back. That would help achieve the balance, which would essentially make us rely on the alternate configurations less. That gets us back to primary configurations, which we have torn apart, and I think we're pretty happy with those. Secondly is and we talked about this probably a couple of years ago, was CDA's ability to close runways. I think we need to put that into hard text in our plan that we submit to the FAA, that CDA reserves the right. It's under their prerogative to close runways as they see fit. By closing runways, I think that gets to address the balance of aircraft relying on the 13,000-foot runways unnecessarily. So we know that we have appropriate runways for large aircraft available at all times, but we can have a little bit of a invisible hand in controlling which runways those land on. Finally, to address FAIR's presentation, Dan, this is complicated. I'm having a tough time getting around this. I had to call my aviation consultant and have him walk me through it. I had SOC walk me through it, and I appreciate all those experts holding my hand and taking my feeble mind through this. Having said that, I don't think our average resident has access to aircraft experts and consultants. So I don't want to get in a position where we have to provide our residents with decoder rings to figure out when flights will be above them at nighttime. So I think we need to err on the side of simplicity. And I think the original presentation of our alternative B is superior to this complicated representation. I cede my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is displays.
Jesus. Hello?
Yep, you're up, Alderman.
Yeah, the problem is I just arrived at the airport, but my only thought is for this moment is I was offended by the comment that the purpose of this thing is to transport, to switch traffic to the extent possible to diagonal runways. I find that an offensive comment, and that's not what I consider what we're trying to do here. But beyond that, I have no further comment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Elmhurst.
Yeah, my only comment is that hybrid configuration is being proposed, and I think that runs in conflict with the split airfield concept, north-south diagonal, and the simplicity of that. So I don't think that is a proper solution. I understand the fine tuning that Dan's trying to do to the 99.5% to 99.6%. But yeah, I don't think we should need to get overly precise with this. So I think the configuration as laid out now is probably better.
Thank you. Harwood Heights. Oh, you're muted, Mayor. Oh.
Yes, thank you. Can you just put back the IIFF slide again, if you will?
I'm sorry, the
one before, when you were showing one and the other with the II and the FF, you were toggling between up and back.
this one.
Yes, that's it. I tend to agree with Bob Dunn about taking a look and making sure that we're utilizing the north airfield and the south airfield appropriately. I still want to digest some of this. It is different. I understand Dan's concern about consecutive runways and with secondary. I just want to digest this a little bit, thinking, is this utilizing like the full runway almost, because you've got departures going on the south runway, you've got arrivals going on the north runway. Is this going against what we're trying to achieve? That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Niles?
My only comment is we really have to be careful about being overly concerned with potential issues. That's the only thing I have to say. I mean, I understand what Dan's doing, and I appreciate what he's trying to do, but we have to be engineers about this. We're not going to be perfect with this. What I believe we're trying to do is put the best thing together that works for the most amount of people in a general way. I mean, there's too many other variables for us to be getting into the kind of concerns of potential problems that may happen in the future. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Joe. Park Ridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Ryan, I need some clarification here. Did I understand correctly, the FAA and the tower controllers have, the local controllers have come back and said, configuration L1 doesn't work for us because I've got a conflict and I got a hot spot between 22 and 9 right. Did I understand that correctly?
I don't think so. Say that again. So what I said was in regards to configuration I'll leave it on this slide on week 6 here. The conflict was with if we were to assign a long runway on the north airfield with the arrivals on 22 right. So air traffic has prefers any additional runway operations occur on the south airfield to avoid those intersecting runways on the north airfield. Is that?
Thank you. I misspoke and you clarified. Do we not have the same potential conflict with 4 left departures and using 9 right as the designated long runway in week 3?
Well, it's when it comes to arrivals, it's, I believe when it, and I don't want to speak too much for traffic, but if we have an arrival stream, it affects the efficiency much more. Basically, they have to start spacing things out to allow for a departure, whereas a departure taking off, you don't have those conflicting flight paths with an arrival stream. So there's, I guess, a little bit easier traffic management when it comes to a departure off of 4 left versus an arrival on 22 right. But I'm happy to double check that with air traffic and clarify.
Yeah, I think we need that because I can see the 22 right arrival. The go around course is going to put it right on top of that 2-8 center departure. And so I can understand why that would be a concern, but I guess here's my point, and Madam Chair, I'll yield the rest of my time. My concern remains that as soon as we put the diagonals in the mix, we run into these kinds of problems. And Chairman Annunzio is correct. We could sit here and debate this and configure it until the cows come home. The fact of the matter is that as soon as we put the diagonals into these mixes, we end up in problems because we still have to have a long piece of concrete available for somebody who wants it. And that's going to be one of the parallels, whether it's the north airfield or the south airfield. So I would renew my call, Madam Chair, that this committee really needs to give consideration and to Alderman Chester's concern. I too, we look at these configurations, whether it's B or H, the minute the diagonals come into play, we run into creating ourselves more problems. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. River Grove?
I really feel that we should keep it as simple as possible and be very cautious as to what we're doing, because the FAA, we want the FAA to approve it. We want CDA to approve it. And if we get too complicated or too crazy with it, it's either going to take a long time for them to figure out what to do, or it's going to be trashed by them and say, go do it over again. It's too complicated.
Thank you.
That's my feeling. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Schiller Park?
Schiller Park is, Bensonville and Niles spoke very well about the issues. And yes, I totally agree. Keep it simple, silly. Otherwise, we get too deep into it and we'll never resolve it. So again, Bensonville and Niles did not a good job. I agree with them.
Okay, thank you. Wooddale?
No need to be repetitive. I have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. Schoenberg's perspective, I appreciate the consecutive impacts that FAIR has identified in the secondary configurations. Getting to Bensonville's point, I do think that this committee made a decision that we wanted to try to achieve some balance between the crosswind and the parallel runways, and also splitting north and south airfields. I also agree with Niles that we can't let perfection be our ultimate goal, because there are just too many complicated circumstances when we're talking about an airfield like O'Hare's. And so with that, I favor keeping the secondary configurations as originally proposed. I think I've made it clear that my position is that this committee and the commission in whole needs to continue to really do a lot of work in terms of minimizing the secondary or the long runway usage, which would hopefully help minimize this concern. But I do have concerns about how complicated things get with the hybrid, I don't favor transitioning crosswind air traffic to an east-west runway. I think, that isn't in the interests of the criteria that we approved. So with that, Cynthia?
Thanks, Karen. I think all of the committee members have hit most of my points. I would just want to remind everybody, when we do shift those arrivals in that secondary configuration, that arrivals are the majority of the operations at night. In IFQ, we had 61 arrivals at night as compared to 31 departures. So in both the 927 and 1028's case, they're trading for 100% of the arrival traffic to potentially eliminate some consecutive alt-long impacts, and we just see that as a bad trade. The complexity of the hybrid configuration has proven to be not something the tower is a big fan of. And anytime the tower struggles with something, they tend to default to 1028, which is not fair to those communities. And then the last issue, I think what Evan raised is very important. We spent a lot of time on that 5-knot tailwind scenario, and I think it's just time for a good reminder of that, because the tower has been very cooperative to date. I think it's just something that has fallen off the radar and something we should revisit. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, before I go on to Ron, I think that's a good point. And Ryan, can we add that tailwind discussion to the list of when we get to procedural topics as something we can cover kind of independent of the alternatives?
Yes, I've already earmarked that after Bensonville's comment.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Ron?
Yeah, I think everyone has hit on what most of my thoughts were on this. One thing, just as a piece of information for people to keep in mind as to why you want to try to keep it as simple as possible at night, is that there is limited staff with air traffic control at night. I think they have maybe two controllers in the tower at night. So when you start trying to mix arrivals and departures on one side of the airfield and maybe departures on the other side, then you're going to have one controller that does departures and one that does arrivals, and they're going to have to start going back and forth between the different sides of the airfield. And this is going to get complicated, and they're not going to want to do that. So we just need to keep that in mind, that simple is best, especially at night. And what Cynthia said about being more arrivals versus departures at night, if you switch everything to a parallel arrivals and you go from a situation of only those aircraft that need a longer runway would potentially use that long runway to putting all the arrivals on that runway. So it kind of overburdens the east-west communities in that situation.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, my memory isn't that good, so I'll try and address all the concerns. I'll start from the back or the end and go to the beginning. I guess I would disagree with the complexity argument. Our understanding is configurations I and L are the most complex. They have CRO considerations. In the case of L, a physically intersecting runway. And those inherently are also hybrid configurations. In this case, they have 3 runways rather than 2. And just to remind the committee, both II and FF were reviewed by the FAA and air traffic control, and they would not advance configurations to the committee for consideration that were too complex. As far as simplicity and the feedback we received from residents, simplicity is having the long runway in its designated week, staying in its designated week and not alternating back and forth. That's both a predictability and equity issue. And I think I would disagree that this would be something that wouldn't happen frequently, mainly because what we experienced with IFQ is it did happen, and it happened throughout basically the entire rotation, where the South Airfield in West Flow has all the long runway operations in the crosswind weeks. And if you look at what currently exists with B, there is no possibility of using the North Airfield in West Flow in crosswind weeks. I agree with Evan, there are issues to address, to try and greater equalize east and west flow. But I think history has proven out in over 2 years of rotation that that's just not something you can control. So this configuration or rotation should really consider what's best for predictability and equity. And we will continue to advocate that consecutive impacts should be a priority to eliminate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going back to the top. Bensonville.
I appreciate everyone's comments on this. Bensonville's comments stand.
Thank you. Des Plaines.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Elmhurst.
Nothing further, thanks.
Harwood Heights.
Hi, I have two questions. For the diagonals, when they're used, how many towers are used to control that? Is it the north and south tower? Do they use the center tower? Can anybody answer that question?
Yes. During the overnight hours, there's only the central tower in use. So for all the configurations that are proposed, the air traffic control will be utilizing the central tower only. The north and south tower are closed.
Okay, and my second question is, they're utilizing the diagonals now. And as they use the diagonals now, when they do need a long runway, do we know what runway they're using? Is it still that cross runway? Are they doing well with it? Or can you give us an idea what long runway when they're using diagonals? Especially with arrivals and that?
Sure. Well, historically, and it depends on which crosswind configuration we're in, whether it's L or I. But typically it would be one of the south airfield runways, either most likely 10 left, 28 right, as it is the longest runway. However, we just finished construction of the north airfield runways, the extension, as well as 9 Center, 27 Center. So we do have a brand new airfield, if you will, especially on the north airfield. So there is plenty of potential use for those, utilization of those runways that are long enough to accommodate majority of flights that need longer pavement. So I know that doesn't really answer your question specifically, but it's hard to say. It's really kind of on a case-by-case basis. There's not a specific runway, but if we were to look back at history, it's usually 10 left, 28 right is the preferred long runway.
Okay. Well, yeah, because we can't look at history of 9C, 27C. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Niles.
Nothing more.
Park Ridge.
No further comments here.
River Grove.
Nothing further, thank you.
Schiller Park.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Wooddale.
Nothing further.
Schaumburg does not have anything further either, so we will go to Cynthia.
On my previous comment stand, thank you.
Thank you. Ron.
Yeah, just one quick comment to expand a little bit on what Ryan just said, and I've mentioned this before. We need to be very cautious about what we take from what happened in IFQ, because that was a completely different airfield than what we have today. So yes, in the past, there was a tendency for, if you needed a long runway, everything went to the south because those were the only long runways available. Now we have different runways available, so we can't make that parallel assumption that what happened in the past is going to happen in the future. So just please keep that in mind.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, I'll try and boil down the argument in just a few points here. It's really argument of qualitative versus quantitative. And I think the quantitative argument is put as much on the diagonals as possible. Unfortunately, that comes at the expense of predictability and equity for the parallels. And looking at this not from a understanding of aviation, but understanding of probability, these are not low probability scenarios. In a dominant West Flow airport, particularly the South Airfield, you can easily get into an 80–90% chance of these consecutive impacts, considering East and West Flow will continue to occur most weeks, regardless of what we want to happen, and that West Flow will remain dominant. And these consecutive impacts are forever. So for some residents, 3 out of every 6 weeks, they will not have that predictability. And in fact, their overall impact is 4 out of every 6 weeks. And unfortunately, in a West Flow airport, a majority of that burden will be carried by the South Airfield. So we'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for your consideration and comments.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, so at this point, if there's no other discussion, I will entertain a motion on the secondary configurations for alternative B.
Point of order, are we approving the FAIR plan, or are we voting for the FAIR plan, or are we voting for the previously adopted?
We will vote for whatever the motion is. So the motion can be to confirm existing or to adopt FAIR's changes. I just need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the previously discussed and existing configurations for alternative B.
Is there
I
a
will
second?
second that.
Thank you. Okay, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Bensonville,
Yes.
Displains,
Yes.
Elmhurst,
Yes.
Howard Heights, Howard
Mayor-
Heights.
Oh,
I think we're muted. You're
yeah,
muted.
I thought I said yes. Sorry.
It's okay, thank you. Niles,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
No.
River Grove,
Yes.
Schaumburg,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
Wooddale.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you all very much on that very thoughtful discussion. That wraps up our discussion on alternative B. So now we are going to move to the refinement of alternative H. I'll be honest, we did not get a ton of advanced feedback on alternative H and modifications being requested. We did get some from Schiller Park. So Ryan, do you want to, I lost you on my screen, Ryan. Do you want to jump in, or did you want me to poll the committee to see which elements they wanted to discuss? What do you prefer?
Well, I guess it's up to you, Madam Chair. I can, we can either handle this the same way as alternative B, where I walk through the history of H and where we got to the current iterations, or we can just jump in and any of the elements here that committee members want to discuss. So we have gotten comments on the primary configuration schedule, as well as some heading changes, primary heading changes. So both of those elements we have gotten requested changes for. So I can go through the history again, like I did with B, or we can jump right into it. It's whatever the committee.
Let's do this. So I'm going to run through the list of committee members. I'm going to ask you to indicate if you would like Ryan to give us all a refresher on sort of the evolution of alternative H, and then to indicate if you would like to discuss any of the 4 elements, being primary configurations, primary headings, secondary configurations, and long runways. And then based on that, we will only cover the elements where there's a desire to discuss them. And then we will go from there. So Bensonville.
I am fine with the plan as previously presented. No further comment.
Okay. Displains?
No further comment.
Elmhurst.
I would only like to clarify, and maybe this is not needed to be clarified, but secondary configurations are the mirror image of the primary configurations. That's what occurred in B, just to confirm that that's occurring in H. And the the headings that we have for B, angling off the runways. Just want to make sure B and H are consistent. If we can confirm that, I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Harwood Heights?
Yes, I would like to see the consistency as well to make sure the headings in B match the headings in H, so that we don't overlook anything.
Great, thank you. Niles? Oh, you're muted, Joe.
I don't think it's necessary to back up. Let's just go to it.
Okay, thank you. Park Ridge?
Nothing further.
River Grove?
I was muted also. Yes, I feel that we pretty much know, we've gone over it so many times that we know what the history is. Let's just go and do it.
All right, thank you. Schiller Park?
Yes, the concerns are the vectors and, the stuff that we emailed out. So if we addressed that, it'd be great.
Yep, we've got you on the list, so we're gonna cover that stuff for sure.
Thank you.
Wooddale?
Nothing further.
Schaumburg doesn't have anything. Fair, did you have anything specific you wanted to make sure we covered?
We'll leave it up to the committee what topics they wish to discuss.
Great, thank you. Cynthia?
So is the committee, when they refer to okay with H, I think in the previous meeting, you showed an alternative H and an H3, which.
So at this point, I'm just trying to pull the committee to understand which areas they want to talk about refinements for alternative H, and then we're gonna dive into it. So does SOC have any refinements to H that you would like to discuss?
No, nothing more than that, what we've represented in the letters in January and February. Thanks.
Thank you. Ron?
Nope, nothing for me.
Okay, so the consensus I have is that we are going to skip the overview. We will have an opportunity to walk through that, I would guess, once we conclude our refinement process, just to kind of refresh that. And then Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have primary configurations, primary headings, and maybe secondary configurations being discussed.
Yes, definitely primary configurations and headings. So happy to jump into primary configurations first.
Great.
So let me, this is original H. Let me skip ahead here. Okay, so alternative H as revised to date, we are calling alternative H3, similar to how we broke up alternative B into 3 iterations. We've done the same thing with H. So this H3 incorporates all of the changes that the committee has made to the alternative to date, including changes to configurations, vector headings. We have those vector headings with a turn on our crosswind runways. And so now we're looking at the rotation schedule. And the comments that we've gotten on the schedule is concerns of configurations causing consecutive impacts in weeks 3 and 4. And so I believe the issue is, if you look at the schedule right now, the way alternative H is scheduled, it includes crosswind runway north airfield, crosswind runway south airfield, crosswind runways north airfield. In weeks 3 and 4, you can see that the long runway 9 right stays on the north airfields the same as week 2 on 27 left. And then in week 4, we have 10 left departures and 10 center arrivals. Week 5, we have the 28 center long runway on the south airfield. So I believe, again, this is a concern of consecutive impacts in relation to that long runway. And so the request was to, let me jump ahead here. The request was to swap weeks 3 and 4 so that configuration L would be scheduled in week 4 and configuration M would be scheduled in week 3. This came from Schiller Park, and so I don't want to misrepresent the request. So if Representative Klug would like to elaborate on the suggestion, he's free to do so.
115 to 110.
Yeah, we're talking about the vector, is that correct? Yes.
This is going back to your email in January where you requested to amend the rotation schedule, the primary configuration in weeks 1 through 6 by switching week 4 to be week 3 and week 3 to be week 4.
You still want to do that?
Well, in light of the previous discussion, we have changed course on that. Just
Okay.
in light of the previous discussion.
Okay. You want to step in?
I think
Hold on one second, please.
So Ryan, isn't that the original configuration H? We swapped those, I believe. If you go back to H, that swaps weeks 3 and 4.
So as far as I understood, the configuration alternative H had configuration L and then M in week 3 and 4. The original configuration, and I can pull that up here.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Ryan?
Yes.
Okay, the secondary impact was our concern, but we have such researched it and we're okay with the existing right now.
Okay, so no change to need.
No, not hard, not with the concept impacts right there. No.
Okay, so let me just quickly clarify for Cynthia here. This is the original rotation schedule, which had the crosswinds scheduled back to back. You can see in week 3 and week 4. Then we changed that to adjust and break those crosswinds so they weren't occurring back to back in the schedule. And so H3 with the configuration I, Q, L in week 3 and M in week 4 is the current configuration schedule. So Madam Chair, at this point, I'm not hearing any additional changes to primary configurations unless anyone else.
Right, I agree. So if there are any committee members who would like to continue the discussion on primary configurations, can you please speak up now? Dan?
Yeah, I'd just make a comment. I think the consecutive impacts are well considered, and I appreciate Schiller Park looking at that. We looked at this as well. Regardless of how you order H, you have consecutive impacts 3 out of every 4 weeks throughout the 16 weeks. And it just boils down to a fundamental flaw where you have 6 configurations rotated over 8 weeks. And without addressing the entire structure of the rotation, those consecutive impacts will persist. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Last call on primary configurations. Anyone else? Okay, then we are going to move on to primary headings.
Okay, I'll just walk through the headings, and I believe the request was that we note any differences between H3 and B3. So I'll do my best to call those out. For runway 4 left, the primary heading in weeks 3, 7, 11, and 15 were changed to a vector heading with a turn. This is the same as what we did for alternative B. And so this runway will have a single vector heading departure procedure with that turn that will be directed by air traffic for the 4 weeks that that runway comes up in the schedule as the primary departure runway. For runway 9 right, the current vector headings are for week 6, a heading of 080 degrees, and week 14, a heading of 065 degrees. This is the same as alternative B as well. For runway 10 left, we have in alternative H, we have week 4, a heading of 100 degrees, and then in week 12, a heading of 115 degrees. This runway, I believe, is different for alternative B. B originally had this, but it was changed to a 110 degree heading for the week 12 vector heading 2, or at least for the second vector heading in alternative B. So this is one of the runways that has a different heading, a second different heading than alternative B does. And here I have the comparison here. You can see on the right, 110 degrees is what we've done in week 12. I'm sorry, in alternative B. And so one of the proposals is to make a similar change for alternative H. Would you like to stop here, Madam Chair, and discuss this, or keep moving through the primary headings?
Nope, let's discuss it while we've got it up and while it's fresh. So, sorry, I'm ill prepared to get my order for the runways. Give me 1 second. Okay, I've got it. So Schiller Park, you get to go first. This was your request.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, let's change it from 115 to 110, because based on our research on the impact of the communities, less people are impacted at 110 versus 115. Even though Schiller Park is not going to come out of any of this 100%, but doing the best for us and the other areas going out further east. I think the 110 is the best solution.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, Harwood Heights.
I agree. I do see that. I think we had a lot of discussions on B, whether it was 110. I thought the majority of us went with 110 and we were going to change it with H, but I will go along with that. 110.
Okay. Thank you. River Grove.
I also agree.
Okay, Elmhurst.
I concur with Schiller Park, the fact that it impacts slightly less population, moving that 115 down to 110. We had a lengthy discussion on that when we were talking about B, so I would support that.
Great. Park Ridge.
Chair will defer to the community's impact. Thank you.
Okay, Niles.
I feel the same as Park Ridge. 110 seems to make some sense.
Okay,
that's all.
Great. Thank you. Bensonville.
Seeing no clear corridor that you could get these planes onto, we'll defer to the impact of communities and go with Schiller Park's recommendation.
Okay. Des Plaines. Des Plaines.
Big TSA got them.
I'm sorry, I didn't hit the thing. 110 sounds fine to me. Defer to the local communities impact.
Thank you. Wooddale.
We will defer to the affected communities.
Okay. Schaumburg has no concerns with making the adjustment from 115 to 110. I agree with Bensonville's statement that there isn't a clear corridor, and I understand the request to make that change, so we're supportive. With that, we'll go with Ron.
Yeah, it just seems like there's been a lot of discussion that happened on B on all these different headings. So whatever was discussed in B should just be applied to H to make it simple. So if 110 was what was in B, then that's what it should be in H.
Okay, great, thank you. Dan?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what we're using to determine noise and population impacts, as the FAA has not done for those that would occur in the EIS. I sort of understood the purpose of this committee with the aid of Landerman Brown to walk us through creating a template, and that these arrows are not representative of noise or dispersion. So I guess express some concern that these are relatively arbitrary and changes, and also just the perception of those impacted that other quadrants are using a 25-degree heading in greater dispersion and some are not. I'm not quite sure how would explain that, what that decision was based on, but thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia?
We support the 100 and the 110 for compatible land use issues, population impacts, and existing sound insulation. This is a better corridor than the 115. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, back to the top. Schiller Park, anything further?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you. Harwood Heights? Oh, you're muted again.
Oh, man. Nothing further, 110.
Thank you. River Grove?
Nothing further.
Elmhurst?
Nothing further, sorry.
That's okay, thanks. Park Ridge?
Nothing further, Chair.
Niles?
Nothing further.
Bensonville?
I just want to echo Ron's comments. The committee did a great job going into headings and alternative B. I wouldn't be opposed to doing a blanket adaptation of those headings, but nothing further.
Okay, Displays?
I agree with Bensonville. That we've gone through this thoroughly, so I'm happy with the decisions we made. Thank you.
Okay, Wooddale?
Nothing further.
Okay, for Schaumburg, I just want to kind of respond to Dan's comment. It's my opinion that population isn't the only thing we're considering with these discussions. I don't think that we should have a uniform departure headings for every runway because land uses are different and there are different circumstances in regards to sound insulated homes. There are compatible corridors that need to be considered, and certainly population density is a factor that we can look at. I think all of that analysis will be done as part of that EIS, but I think it's fair that we consider that all things are not developed equally around the airport, and our departure headings should reflect that. So I'm comfortable with the 110. Ron, anything further?
No comment.
Dan?
Yeah, I would just respond if there was data available to determine compatible land use, population impact, noise impact, that should have been presented to the committee and vetted by the FAA as the expert in that field. I'll reiterate my comment that I still think some of this is arbitrary, but thank you.
Cynthia?
My comments stand. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so here's how I'm going to handle this. We are going to take a vote on the 10 left departure headings because that's the discussion we had. But in light of some of the comments from some of the communities about a desire to just adopt the same departure headings as B, we'll take this vote. I'll ask Ryan to highlight any additional changes, and then our discussion will then move on to, would the committee like to just do a blanket adoption of the departure headings that were adopted for B3? So again, this will be solely on 10 left because that's the discussion we just had. We will move on from there. So do I have a motion on departure headings for runway 10 left?
Yeah, Schiller Park like to make a motion to adopt 10 left from the same as B and H, from 115 to 110.
Okay, so just to clarify, the departure headings for runway 10 left under this motion would be 100 degrees and 110 degrees.
Correct.
Second,
That was Bensonville?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's roll call.
Bensonville,
Yes.
Displains,
Yes.
Elmhurst,
Yes.
Harwood Heights,
Yes.
Niles,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
yes,
Hang on a second.
Schaumburg,
Yes,
Schiller Park,
Yes.
Wooddale,
Yes.
motion carries.
okay, thank you all very much. Ryan, can you go through other differences between B and H, please?
Yes, so the next runway that has a difference between B and H is runway 28 right, specifically with the second vector heading. Both alternatives utilize the 260-degree vector heading for the first vector heading. However, alternative H currently has a vector heading of 250 degrees, while alternative B changed that to 245 degrees. So 5 degrees less of a turn for week 16 would be the change. I apologize, I don't have a side-by-side comparison. If needed, I can pull up the alternative B heading to show that. But the difference is vector heading 2 being 245 versus 250.
Okay. Is that the only other change?
No, I'm sorry. And then the next one would be 27 left, where in alternative B, we currently have 27 left at 295 for the second vector heading and 280 for heading 1.
I think we changed that last time, Ryan.
Oh, that's right, we did. Yes, that was adopted at the last meeting. So 275 is both, and 295 are both the same for both B and H. So the only remaining difference would be 28 right.
Okay, so I guess we will just discuss this one. Sorry, we can't just go through everything. So with that, sorry, got to get my order. Bensonville, you're up first.
Yeah, we support the adaptation to adopt the headings from alternative B to move the 250 to 245 and call it a day.
Great, thank you. Wooddale?
I don't recall what SOC's recommendation was on this particular week 8 and week 16, but I would defer to what Cynthia says because I don't recall, but in the other slide, Waddell was opposed to the 295 heading.
Elmhurst?
We are okay with adjusting 250 to 245 so that it is in alignment with what we have in B right now.
Okay. Schaumburg's up next, and I concur. I'm comfortable with adopting the departure headings that match what we approved with alternative B after that lengthy discussion. River Grove?
I agree with the 245.
Schiller Park?
Schiller Park will go with 245.
Harwood Heights?
I agree, 245.
Ward 39 is not here. Park Ridge?
Yeah, Chair, we'll defer to the communities impacted. Thank you.
Niles?
We're also going to defer, but I do want to hear what Cynthia has to say.
Okay. Displains?
245 defer.
Okay. Ron?
No comment.
Cynthia?
So SOC, we did recommend the 260 and the 250, but we would defer to Evan as the most impacted community. So if he is in agreement with that, we certainly would be too, but we would ask the same respect be applied to Wooddale, Itasca, and Elk Grove Village, who are the most impacted communities from the 27 left departures. And those communities are all in favor of a 275 and a 285 heading. So we would ask that alternative B and H both be the same at 275 and 285 and default to those communities. And I would add that those communities are being represented by their mayors in that request, and they are the elected representative of those communities. The comments against those headings, I think, have been maybe by less representative sources that are not elected, have not formally met as a group to vote on what they think is the best for all of their residents, whereas SOC has done that. We do that regularly. It's not easy to come to a consensus because we represent 9 communities, but I think they've remained dedicated to that process and really gone the extra mile to do the best for all of the residents, not just their town's representatives or residents. So we would just ask the committee give the same respect to Elk Grove Village, Itasca, and Wooddale, and consider 275 and 285 as the headings for B and H.
Okay, just as a point of order, Elk Grove is not a member of the ONCC. Schaumburg is also impacted by that runway, but we are actually discussing runway 28 right now. So with that, Dan, do you have any other comments?
Yes, sorry, my feeble mind's kicking in. The 245 is the 25-degree heading in the proposals to change it from 250 to 245. Is that correct? Approved is 250 in the proposal to change it to 245. Okay. Yeah, the 245 being the 25-degree heading, that was the heading that was reviewed by the FAA, suitable for the entire fleet mix, creates the greatest dispersion. We will continue to say that should be adopted universally as the greater heading. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Starting again at the top, Bensonville.
I take umbrage with anyone saying that Bensonville is not the most impacted community. I encourage anyone to pull out a map and look at where these runways fly over last and lowest, and it is Bensonville. So let's just make our comments accurate when we speak. I rest.
Thank you. Wooddale.
I don't know, Evan. Maybe Wooddale is the most impacted. No, I'm just kidding. We'll go to the 255 if that's what Evan wants.
Okay, Schaumburg has nothing further. Elmhurst.
Pass.
River Grove.
Nothing further.
Schiller Park.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Harwood Heights.
Oh, no further comment.
Ward 39. Oh, he's not here. Sorry. Park Ridge.
Nothing further, Chair.
Niles.
Now there's nothing further to say.
Des Plaines.
Nothing further.
Okay, Ron.
Nothing.
Cynthia.
My comments stand. Thanks.
Dan.
Nothing further.
Okay, so at this
Madam
point.
Chair, can I make a omnibus motion to adopt the alternative B headings for alternative H just in one fell swoop so we can end this? We've gone through this discussion several times. Every member's made their voice clear. Majority has won on everything. Let's just do an omnibus adaptation.
I'll
There a
second
second?
that motion.
Okay, I'm gonna run through the list and give everyone an opportunity to weigh in on that motion, and then we will take a vote. So Bensonville, you made the motion. Any
We've covered a
comments?
lot of ground today. I appreciate everyone's time. Let's wrap this meeting up.
Okay, Des Plaines.
Yeah, I'm in support of the motion.
Elmhurst.
Well, I think this was the last primary heading discussion for H. Then I believe we're moving the long runways. Is the motion to adopt this particular,
I
for this
think-
particular departure, the B departures plus the long runway configurations? I'm not
No.
sure.
Just for the headings, Alderman, great question. I'm making the motion just for the headings. I basically want the minutes for when somebody goes back and looks to reflect that this committee through the B process has really delved into all the headings. And all of our comments back for B probably stand for H. And so we should just clean everything up and make sure that we're reflecting all the work we did in B here for the H.
Great. Well, that's the exact comment I had to open the discussion. So I would certainly concur with Evan's motion. Thanks.
Harwood Heights.
On departures.
Yes, I agree that, as I said earlier, that B should be consistent with H based on all the conversation we had. This is the last one, but I'm fine with having them the best and just approving it all generically. That's fine.
Niles.
No comment.
Park Ridge.
Support the representative from Bensonville's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. River Grove.
I support it.
Schiller Park.
Same, also supported, and moving on.
Okay. Wooddale.
We're still opposed in H to week 10 at the 295 heading.
Okay. Schaumburg's supportive of adopting alternative B headings. I think we've had extensive conversation on all of these over multiple weeks, and I think this is a good idea for the record. Dan?
Defer to the committee on this decision.
Ron?
No comment.
Cynthia?
SOC prefers the 285 heading as the second heading for all the reasons I stated before. Thanks.
Okay, so there is a motion and a second on the floor. The motion is in regards to departure headings for alternative H to adopt those departure headings as approved for alternative B3. Is that correct, Ryan?
Yes, and I just want to be clear because this will be helpful that includes both the departure headings for the primary runways as well as the long runways. So we can have a full swoop match of all the headings for alternative B will match all the headings for alternative H.
That is correct in my initial motion. It's for all headings. We did a great job delving into every single runway's headings. A great discussion for B. There's no reason it should really change for H. And the dissent on different headings is well documented as well. So everyone's voice is being heard.
Okay, with that, we're going to do a roll call vote.
Bensonville,
Yes.
Displains,
Yes.
Elmhurst,
Yes.
Harwood Heights,
Yes.
Niles,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes.
Schaumburg,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
Wooddale.
Yes.
Motion
Okay.
carried.
Thank you all for your discussion. Ryan, where are we at now?
Well, I believe we have gone through primary headings as well as primary configurations. Unless any committee members would like to revisit secondary configurations or long runways, which we have not received, to my knowledge, any advanced comments, we're ready to move on.
Okay, so this is a final call for refinements to alternative H. Is there anyone on the committee who would like to discuss secondary configurations or long runway designations for alternative H? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, seeing none, we don't have enough time today to get into kind of a substantive discussion on our next steps. So what I want to do is lay out for you all where we are going from here. I appreciate this committee's hard work on getting us to this point. I know it has been a long road, but I think our work is paying great dividends. And I think that we've got some really thoughtful and groundbreaking plans to consider. Our next step is to take the refined alternative B and alternative H and to discuss which alternative is the committee's preferred alternative. We will have that discussion next because it's my opinion that these are fresh in our minds and we have a good understanding of the changes that we've made, and now is a good time to make that decision. After we identify a preferred alternative, we will circle back to those procedural discussions that apply to either alternative, things like tailwinds that we discussed, construction impacts. I know there was some desire to discuss kind of the altitude for turns. So Ryan will package all of that, but that will occur after we take a vote on a preferred alternative. The other thing that I want to make everyone aware of is that discussion will occur at our March meeting. I appreciate that we have had some technical assistance over the years from SOC, FAIR, and Ron, really contributing to this discussion. I think their contributions have been so valuable. I think they've contributed to these products being better than they would have been without their voice at the table. But for our next meeting, this is a policy discussion. And so we are going to run the meeting similar to how non-committee members participate in our meetings. So on the next agenda, there will be an opportunity for non-fly quiet committee members to speak before the committee begins their deliberations. I'm going to extend that courtesy to our technical non-voting members as well. But once we get into the substantive policy discussion on a preferred alternative, only voting committee members will be participating in that conversation. So please come prepared with your speaking points. Any questions that you want clarified, certainly take advantage of the next month to reach out to myself or Landerman Brown or CDA if you have questions or just want to talk through things before we get to that March meeting. But I'm looking forward to the discussion and I really appreciate everyone's feedback and input up to this point. Yes, Bensonville.
Madam Chair, do you anticipate taking a final vote to advance an alternative at that meeting, or do you anticipate a cooling off period in between?
No, I anticipate that the process I see is that we will take a vote at the next meeting, assuming we wrap up our discussions and deliberations. We will vote on a preferred alternative. We will then move on to procedural discussions. And then once we've kind of wrapped up those procedural discussions and made any decisions and taken any votes on those topics, we will then package everything together and take a final vote on a complete fly quiet package to advance to the full ONCC commission.
And then this is the point for maybe Aaron or Ryan. Ryan, when we advance a preferred alternative to the FAA for review, what does the minority alternative do? What happens to that? Does that lay in wait? Is that also analyzed?
So how it will work, and this is something we can definitely touch on in more detail at the next meeting so that everyone is clear what the process is. But really the committee should focus on what is the program they want, submit that. Everything else that has been considered will of course go in the documentation. But really the program that the committee moves forward with is the program that you all wish to see implemented. When the FAA reviews that, they will look at that program, that alternative, and also look at any other options. And what you have all done to date is explore all these other options. So you've already done a lot of the work that'll all be detailed in the package. And so really that will just be more detail for the FAA to make their decision easier, because you all have already vetted many of the alternatives, and this is the one that you prefer. If there is an issue that comes up in the environmental process that may cause an alternative to be more considered than another, that's something that's would be very hard to guess at, and I don't want to speak for how the FAA will handle that, but most times the preferred alternative is the one that gets approved.
Okay, and I think just to clarify, you and I, this committee is making a recommendation to the full ONCC, and the full ONCC will make that, will move that on to the FAA. Okay.
Correct. This committee is recommending that this be the program for the future Fly Quiet. The ONCC still needs to vet it and approve it before the CDA will submit for FAA approval. But clearly we need to touch base on all these things, make sure the committee understands the process, and I think we can do that briefly up front before we begin any votes at the next meeting.
Dennis?
Was talking on mute. I would like to ask to have the committee provided with the updated maps of both C and H, so we can do a little further study on it before making a decision, next meeting.
Yep.
And I was wondering if that could be put in a package or emailed to us.
Yes, I think that is a very valid request, and I'm confident Landerman Brown will be able to provide those materials to the committee in advance of the meeting. So good suggestion.
Thank you.
Okay, is there
All right.
any other question or comments? Yes, Harwood Heights.
Thank you. At the last meeting, there was a audience comment brought up by David Delka. And he asked that I call him. I did call him. And one of his concerns that he shared was the constant interruptions of his cell phones, Wi-Fi, and so forth. He's not so much concerned about the departures. He was concerned about the landings and about the slope. He feels that the flights are coming in very, very low. If we're looking at these preferred alternatives, could we also consider the slopes that are being abided by? And also he mentioned Heathrow landing patterns because they have so much population around, and what type of slopes and so forth are they doing? So it's something maybe we can look at when we do our final.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Dan?
Yeah, and I appreciate Mayor Giserni bringing that up. We've received some similar feedback. We spend a better part of a year on departures, that when the committee considers the preferred alternative, to turn some attention back to arrivals, which are 2/3 of the operations, and give those residents equal consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other committee comments? Okay, seeing none, just for the committee's calendars, a reminder, we did change the date of our next Fly Quiet committee meeting. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, March 22nd at 9:30 a.m. We are going to keep that meeting on Zoom. There are discussions about bringing this group and all of the ONCC meetings back together in person, but for March, we're going to remain virtual for the time being. So please make sure you've got that on your calendars. And with that, comments from the audience. Frank, I know you'd like to say something.
Yes, back to the headings. And I don't know if Ryan covered this, but if he did, maybe he could reiterate it again. That I think we all understand there's no guarantee that the aircrafts are going to adhere to a particular heading. But is there an expectation maybe that, for instance, if they're departing from the South Airfield, is there an expectation that they will continue going to their destination without crossing over and crossing into the north side of the airfield to the adjacent wards in the city and suburbs for that matter? Because I've personally seen that the aircraft will take off to the east from the South Airfield and bank sharply to the north, and that just obviously causes a lot of noise on the north side of the field, where the expectation is that they were going to be on the south side. And secondly, a comment to the representative from SOC, that about the representation and the horse trading that's going on. Everybody saying, well, I'll just go along with the communities that are involved. I'd like to remind all the communities that the 41st Ward of Chicago has 67,000 residents with no representation on the committee. And you know, when you're voting, consider Chicago also. You know, we're not invisible. We do get all the noise that goes to the east. So thank you. If Ryan can comment on the expectation of an aircraft staying on the south side of the field after they take off and head on that on the vector that's going southeast. Are they expected to maintain that heading, or can they go anywhere they want at 3,000 feet?
Yes, so the expectation is that they will maintain the heading to the best of their ability until 3,000 feet, at which point air traffic will give them direction that will be more in line with either their destination or the next waypoint that they need to get to. So that does mean that the traffic may cross over a north community or a south community, but the expectation is that at that point, they're going to be much higher, significantly higher than they would have been if they had made that turn directly after takeoff. But again, there is no further noise abatement after the 3,000 feet, if that answers your question.
Yes, I understand it. And I just wanted everybody on the committee that's going to vote on this to understand that the planes are not going to continue going in that vector heading for any amount of time, because some of these planes are at 3,000 feet, 2 miles away from the airport. And if you look at the depictions of the arrows, they extend to 5 or 6 miles from the airport. And most planes are way over 3,000 feet by that time. So if anybody's voting expecting that the planes are going to be within that arrow over one community, it's not going to happen that way. Some of these planes get up to 3,000 feet before they leave the airport property, and they make a 90-degree turn over the airport. So when you're voting, consider that they're not really going to be where the arrow shows them. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments today? All right, seeing none, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Almost so.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Bensonville,
Aye.
Displains,
Aye.
Elmhurst,
Aye.
Harwood Heights,
Aye.
Niles,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes.
Schaumburg,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
Wooddale.
Yes.
You're adjourned.
Okay, thank you all very much. We will see you again in March.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Dennis, stay dry.
I will. Cosmo says aye. Oh. Bye. Let's talk to you later.
See ya.